Hey, I'm Emma. Welcome to Emma's Betrayal Stories now. Before we start, go grab a snack and get comfortable for a bit. These stories aren't rushed. They're the kind you sit with. Today's story comes with an update and my own personal opinions throughout the story. Let me know in the comments if you agree or see it differently. Let's begin. When my family laughed at my dreams, I built a business that made them take notice. My mother's laugh cut through the clink of glasses like someone had tapped a spoon against crystal. She's always had big ideas, she told the woman in the green blazer, the one whose badge said investor in neat block letters. My mother's hand was on the investor's arm like they were old friends. When she was little, she'd put a sheet over 2 chairs and call it a boutique. We used to tell her, "Sweetheart, that's not a job." My father chuckled beside her, proud, like this was a cute story about a child who finally learned better, while behind them, my company's logo glowed on a 12-foot screen and my name sat under it in white letters. I felt my throat tighten so fast I swallowed wrong. The room smelled like citrus and expensive perfume and the hot metal of stage lights. My fingers were numb around the stem of my water glass. Then my brother Kareem leaned in, grinning, and said, "Honestly, if we hadn't pushed her into reality, she'd still be playing with balloons." I stepped forward before I fully decided to. The hem of my dress brushed my knees, the fabric suddenly too tight like it knew I was about to do something irreversible. "Hi," I said, and my voice sounded bright, too bright, like I'd accidentally switched to customer service mode. My mother's smile widened at first, automatic, then stuttered when she saw my face. The investor turned toward me, polite, curious. Kareem's grin didn't move, but his eyes sharpened. "Sana," my mother said, warm and warning at the same time. I could feel heat in my ears, the kind that makes everything else go slightly muffled. "What are you doing over here? You should be mingling." "I am," I said, and I looked straight at Kareem. "I am mingling."
"With people you're lying to." My father's laugh died mid-breath. Kareem blinked once, slow, like he was trying to decide whether to play dumb or play offended. "Excuse me," he said, still smiling, still smooth. The investor's eyebrows lifted just a fraction. I could feel her attention shift from my family's charming little story to the tension in my shoulders. My hands shook, so I tucked them behind my back and dug my nails into my own palms. "You didn't push me into reality," I said to Kareem, each word measured like I was setting something fragile down. "You mocked me. There's a difference." It started 4 years ago on a Tuesday night, the kind where the fluorescent lights in my cubicle made my skin look sick and my stomach felt permanently lined with coffee. I was 26, working in operations at a company that loved the word synergy and treated creativity like a problem to be managed. I had a notebook hidden in my bottom drawer, pages of sketches, color palettes, floor plans, timelines. Not just pretty ideas. Actual plans. I wanted to start an event design and production studio. Not balloons from the dollar store party planning. I'm talking corporate launches, conferences, weddings with real budgets, brand experiences. I'd worked weddings on weekends since college, building centerpieces at midnight and carrying chairs until my arms were jelly, and I knew I was good. I also knew what I lacked: permission. My family was the kind that believed real jobs came with uniforms, degrees, and someone else's logo on your paycheck. In their mind, my dream was a hobby that needed to be bullied out of me before it embarrassed us. The night I told them, my mother didn't even look up from stirring lentil soup. "Events?" she repeated, like I'd said I wanted to become a mermaid. Kareem laughed outright. "You're going to be one of those people who glues rhinestones to mason jars?" he said. My father's face went stiff, not angry, more like disappointed. "You have a stable job," he said, as if that ended the conversation. "You want to throw it away for decorations." I tried to explain, too fast, too eager. I talked about contracts and vendors, about production schedules and corporate retainers. Kareem leaned back in his chair, smirking, and said, "Tell me you're bored without telling me you're bored." My mother sighed, that long-suffering sigh that makes you feel like you're 16 again. "Sweetheart," she said, "dreams are nice, but you have to be realistic." Then she added, like she was being generous. Do it on the side if you must. So I did it on the side. At first, I took small jobs, engagement parties, baby showers, nonprofit dinners. I said yes to everything. My living room became a warehouse. I learned the weight limit of my car trunk. I memorized the smell of different venues. Old carpet, fresh paint, seawater near the marina, that weird chlorine scent in hotel ballrooms. I learned how to calm down panicked brides without absorbing their panic like a sponge. I learned the difference between a vendor who's late and a vendor who's about to ghost you. I built a spreadsheet of every contact I ever met. I sent follow-up emails at 1 a.m. with my eyes burning. My friends thought I was insane. My family thought it was cute. And then one day, a client I'd done a small launch party for called me and said, "We're doing a regional conference. Can you handle 300 people?" I remember sitting on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, staring at my chipped coffee table covered in fabric samples and thinking, if I say no, I will never forgive myself. If I say yes, I might drown. I can handle it, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone braver than me. That conference paid more than a month of my stable job. It also nearly broke me. I slept in 2-hour chunks. I cried in a supply closet because the stage backdrop arrived in the wrong shade, and I thought it was a sign. I was not built for this. But the event went well. Better than well. The CEO shook my hand at the end and said, "You made us look expensive." Then he asked for my card. 2 months later, I quit my job. I didn't tell my family right away. I know that sounds childish, but the truth is I couldn't handle their voices. I couldn't handle my father's disappointed silence, Kareem's jokes, my mother's anxious questions. I wanted to quit for me, not as a debate. When I finally told them, it went exactly how you'd expect. My mother cried and asked if I'd lost my mind. My father said, "Don't come to us when it falls apart." Kareem laughed and said, "Let me know when you need a loan." I started my company anyway. I called it Silverline Studio because I liked the idea of being the line that makes something look finished, clean, sharp, intentional. I registered the business. I made a website that looked too polished for my reality. I sat at my kitchen table signing my first real contract with a pen that kept skipping. I opened a business account with $50 in it and felt weirdly proud. The first year was brutal. People romanticize entrepreneurship like it's waking up at noon and sipping green juice in a sunlit office. My first year was sweating through my shirt while hauling rental furniture, then coming home and answering emails with sore hands. It was paying invoices before I paid myself. It was smiling at clients while my bank account screamed. It was being one bad month away from crawling back to my stable job with my tail between my legs. But I didn't crawl back. I got better. I hired help. I found my people, the vendor who always showed up early, the florist who would text me photos of arrangements for approval, the lighting tech who treated my events like art. I stopped saying yes to clients who wanted champagne on a soda budget. I started charging what I was worth and watching the world not collapse when I did. And then, slowly, my family's laughter turned into something else. Not pride. Not support. Interest. At first, it was little comments. My mom would ask, "So, are you making money with this?" Like money was the only proof of legitimacy. Kareem started dropping hints at family dinners about how he was thinking of getting into business. My dad would say things like, "You must be busy," without ever asking what I was actually building. The year I landed a contract with a national brand for a product launch, my company name ended up in a trade article. Just a small mention. But my aunt called my mother, and suddenly my mother was texting me. "Send me the link. I want to show your father." That should have felt good, right? Instead, it made me feel exposed. Like my life was being observed through a window that had always been there, and they only noticed it once it looked expensive. Still, I invited them to the big moments. Part of me kept hoping they'd show up as my family, not as spectators.
Which is how we got to tonight.
Tonight was the Silverline Studio 4-year celebration. It wasn't just a party. It was also a soft launch for a partnership I'd been negotiating for months, an investor group that wanted to help me scale. Nina, the investor in the green blazer, had been in my DMs after seeing my work on social media. She wasn't easily impressed. She asked hard questions. She didn't laugh at my numbers. She listened. She made me feel like my dream wasn't a child's sheet over chairs. It was a business. I invited my family because, I don't know, because I'm still stupidly hopeful. Because I wanted my father to stand in a room full of people who respected me and maybe, finally, see me. Instead, he stood there laughing with my mother and Kareem while they told a story that made me sound like a cute hobbyist who needed them to push me into success. And Kareem, who'd never been to a single setup, never carried a chair, never calmed a crying client, never helped me when my car broke down on the way to a venue, was acting like he'd been my mentor. I asked him again, quietly, "Why are you doing this?" He widened his eyes in fake innocence. "Doing what?" "Acting like you built me," I said. My mother's smile snapped back into place. "Sanaa," she said sharply, under her breath. "Stop. This is not the time." Kareem laughed softly and turned to the investor. "You have to forgive her," he said, charming. "She's always been sensitive about family stuff. She thinks we're against her, when we're just being honest." My stomach flipped. The investor's gaze slid to me, measuring. And that's when I realized what Kareem was doing. He wasn't just lying for ego. He was setting a frame. If I objected, I'd look emotional, unstable, unprofessional. If I stayed quiet, his lie would harden into the version of me people believed. I took a breath that felt like swallowing a stone. "Kareem," I said, loud enough that the investor could hear clearly, "you've never worked with me. You don't speak for my company. And you don't get to introduce me as someone who needs pushing into reality." The investor's eyes sharpened now. My mother's face tightened. My father looked like someone had slapped him with embarrassment. Kareem's smile thinned. "Wow," he murmured. "Okay. Drama." I kept my voice steady. "If you're proud of me, you can say that. If you're not, you can stop talking." The investor cleared her throat. "I appreciate clarity," she said calmly, and her tone made it clear she'd heard more than just words. She'd heard dynamics. My mother's hand shot out and gripped my wrist under the table of appetizers, nails digging. "What is wrong with you?" she whispered, teeth clenched. "You can't just—" I pulled my wrist free, gently but firmly. "Watch me," I said. And that should have been the big confrontation. That should have been the scene where I walk away and feel empowered. Except family messes rarely stay in one neat moment. Because 20 minutes later, one of my coordinators, Jess, 23, blunt, loyal, came up to me with her face pale. "Sanaa," she whispered, tugging my sleeve. "We have a problem." My mouth went dry. "What kind of problem?" She handed me her phone. On the screen was an email thread. The sender name was Kareem. The signature at the bottom said, "Kareem, last name, business development, Silverline Studio." And below that, an attached proposal for one of my biggest clients. A proposal I had not written, with numbers that made my stomach drop. He'd undercut my pricing by nearly 30%. And he'd promised services we don't even offer. I stared at the screen so long the words blurred. Jess swallowed. "The client replied," she whispered. "They thought it was you. They asked when we could start." I could hear the party around me. Laughter, music, glasses. I could smell the cake. I could see my mother across the room taking photos like she'd earned the right. My hands went cold. My chest felt tight, like I'd been wrapped in wire. Kareem hadn't just lied. He'd reached into my business and tried to steer it. And in that moment, I knew tonight was going to end very differently than I'd planned. Okay, pausing here because I need to say it. Kareem is not confident or ambitious. Kareem is the kind of person who treats other people's work like a free sample tray. He'll take a bite, then tell everyone he cooked the meal. What makes him especially infuriating is the polish. He knows how to smile, how to charm, how to slide a lie into a conversation like it belongs there. He didn't just want attention at the party, he wanted control. That email signature is not an accident. That's identity theft with a LinkedIn filter. The parents are the classic "we don't mean harm" enablers who cause harm anyway. They're not laughing because the dream is funny. They're laughing because it's safer to mock what they didn't understand than to admit they underestimated their own daughter. And the second her dream becomes impressive, they want to rewrite the past so they look supportive instead of dismissive. It's a selfish kind of pride that centers them. And Sanaa? She's been trained to swallow disrespect to keep peace. That's why this hits so hard. It's not just one lie at one party. It's years of being made smaller, then watched only when she grew big enough to reflect light back onto them. The fact that she finally said, "Watch me," is huge. The problem is boundaries feel like betrayal to people who benefited from you having none. Kareem is about to act like she ruined him when really he's the one who tried to hijack her livelihood. I hope she goes scorched earth professionally because this isn't family drama anymore. This is sabotage. Update. So I posted about this situation in a much more anonymous, less detailed way because I was spiraling and needed outside perspective. I did not expect the volume of people telling me, very bluntly, that what my brother did was not annoying. It was dangerous. Like, change every password tonight, dangerous. I read those comments at 2 a.m. Sitting on my kitchen floor in yesterday's makeup with my heels kicked off and my dress hanging off one shoulder, and for the first time I stopped framing this as a feelings problem. It was a business problem. That night, after the party ended, I didn't sleep. I went straight into containment mode. First, I called my operations manager, Priya. She's older than me, calm in a way that feels almost supernatural, and she has the kind of voice that makes you obey even when you're panicking. "Okay," she said after I explained, "we're going to treat this like a security breach." She made me email her the thread and any screenshots. Then she told me to make a list of every system Kareem could have accessed: email logins, shared drive, CRM, proposal templates, billing software. I felt sick realizing how many times I typed a password in front of him at family gatherings while he watched me work on my laptop, how many times I'd answered casual questions like, "What software do you use?" Because I didn't think my own brother would weaponize it. Next, I emailed the client. Immediately. Not tomorrow. Not after I calm down. Immediately. I wrote, "Hi, I need to clarify that an email was sent from someone falsely representing themselves as part of Silverline Studio. Please disregard the proposal attached. I will call you within the hour to discuss accurate scope and pricing. I apologize for the confusion." My fingers shook so hard I had to retype 3 sentences. Then I called them. I kept my voice steady while my stomach churned. The client, bless them, sounded more confused than angry. They said, "We thought it was odd the tone didn't sound like you." That sentence made me want to both laugh and cry. My reputation had a voice. Kareem didn't know it. Then I did the humiliating part. I had to tell my investor, Nina, that my brother had attempted to impersonate my company. I expected her to pull away. Investors do not like mess. But she surprised me. She said, "Thank you for telling me quickly. Handle it professionally and it becomes a story about leadership, not chaos." She also added, very quietly, "And stop bringing him near your business." The next day, I met with a lawyer, someone my company uses for contracts. I sat in their office with a manila folder of screenshots like I was bringing evidence to court. The lawyer listened and said, very calmly, "This is misrepresentation. Potentially fraud. At minimum, we send a cease and desist. If he's used your branding to solicit business, you need a paper trail showing you objected immediately." So we sent the letter. And then my family exploded. My mother called me sobbing, saying I was destroying the family. My father said, "How could you do this to your brother?" Kareem left me a voicemail calling me a cold corporate robot and saying I needed him to keep my business from failing, which was almost impressive in its delusion. The hardest part wasn't the legal stuff. The hardest part was realizing my family was less concerned that Kareem tried to sabotage my livelihood and more concerned that I was making consequences visible. They wanted everything handled quietly so Kareem could keep his dignity and I could keep swallowing.
I didn't swallow this time.
I changed every password. I added 2-factor authentication to everything. I locked down my branding files. Priya and I wrote a short internal note to my team. If you receive communication from anyone claiming to represent Silverline Studio that is not from our verified channels, do not engage. Forward to management. I also had to do the awkward thing of telling a few key vendors, if my brother contacts you, ignore him. Saying that sentence out loud made my cheeks burn with shame. But the shame belonged to him, not me. Then came the family meeting request. My mother wanted everyone to sit down and talk. In the past, I would have gone and tried to smooth it over, try to make them understand. This time I told her, I will talk to you and Dad. Kareem is not invited. She said, that's cruel. I said, it's a boundary. And for the first time in my life, I didn't show up to a family event to be the reasonable one. I showed up to be the protected one. So here's what happened after the update and how it ended. I met my parents at their house on a Sunday afternoon. The house smelled like cumin and lemon cleaner and the same old comfort that used to make me forgive everything. My mother had laid out fruit like it was a peace offering. My father sat stiffly on the couch, remote in his hand like he needed something to grip. My mother started immediately. Your brother is humiliated, she said, voice trembling. He can't sleep. He says you ruined his life. I sat down, but I didn't sink into the cushions. I sat like someone waiting for a meeting to begin. He tried to impersonate my business, I said. He sent a proposal to my client. He undercut my pricing and promised services we don't offer. That could have cost me the client. It could have cost me my reputation. My father's jaw tightened. He was trying to help, he said, and the words landed like a slap because they were so familiar. I stared at him. Help, I repeated. By pretending he worked at my company? My mother looked away. My father's ears went red. For a moment, there was silence except the hum of the fridge. Then my mother said, we just don't understand why you had to involve lawyers. I felt something in me go very still. Because he wouldn't listen to me, I said. Because he thinks my life is something he can borrow without asking. Because when I corrected him at the party, you didn't tell him to stop. You told me to stop. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. I took a breath. My hands weren't shaking now. That was new. You laughed when I told you my dream, I said, voice even. You called it unrealistic. Kareem mocked me for years. I built this business anyway. And now that it's real, you're trying to rewrite history like you supported me all along. My mother's eyes filled. We were scared, she whispered. I was scared too, I said. I did it anyway. My father's shoulders slumped slightly, like he was tired. What do you want from us? He asked. The question was almost pathetic in its honesty. Like they truly didn't know what accountability looked like. I want you to stop protecting Kareem from consequences, I said. And I want you to stop expecting me to carry the peace. My mother wiped her cheeks. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter, I replied. That landed. I saw it hit them, finally, not as drama, but as fact. My father stared at the floor. Then, quietly, he said, he shouldn't have done that. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a speech. But it was the first time my father had said a sentence that didn't excuse Kareem at my expense. My mother whispered, we raised him to think he could talk his way out of anything. I nodded. You did. We sat with that for a while, the truth heavy in the room. I told them my terms. Not requests. Terms. Kareem is not allowed at my office, my events, my vendor meetings. He is not allowed to represent my company in any way. If he contacts my clients again, I will pursue legal action without warning. If they want a relationship with me, they don't get to guilt me into dropping boundaries. My mother flinched through most of it. My father looked like someone swallowing pride with difficulty. When I stood to leave, my mother said, small and shaky, will you ever forgive him? I paused with my hand on my bag strap. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't the same as access. I left. Kareem tried one last move a month later. He texted me, saying he wanted to apologize and start fresh. It looked almost convincing until the second message. Also, I have a great idea for expanding your client base, and we should talk partnership.
Partnership.
I stared at the word, then I blocked his number. That was the moment I understood. Kareem doesn't want reconciliation. He wants re-entry. My business kept growing. The investor partnership went through, partly because I handled the crisis quickly and transparently, and partly because Nina told me, this is what leadership looks like. You don't panic. You protect the mission. I hired 2 more coordinators. I moved into a larger studio space. We signed a contract that put Silverline on the map in our city. My parents started showing up differently, not perfectly, but differently. My father came to my studio once and stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed inside. He looked at the racks of linens, the mood boards, the production calendar covering the wall, and he said, softly, "You built all this?" "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "It's impressive." It wasn't "I'm sorry." It wasn't "I was wrong." But it was the first time he'd looked at my dream without laughing. And that night, the night you started with, I went back into the party after the panic, after the emails, after the shock, and I stood on stage when it was time to speak. My voice was steady. I thanked my team. I thanked the vendors. I thanked the clients who trusted us. I didn't thank my family for pushing me into reality.
I didn't give them that rewrite.
When the applause hit, it wasn't for a cute little hobby. It was for a business I built with my own hands. They noticed. And I finally stopped needing that to mean they deserved a place inside it. Kareem is the kind of person who confuses proximity with entitlement. Because he watched you struggle, because he heard you talk about your plans at family dinners, he thinks he has partial ownership of the outcome. Like being in the room while someone dreams is the same as helping them build. The email signature, business development, Silverline Studio, is honestly unhinged. That's not ambition. That's a man trying to steal a life because he can't tolerate the idea of earning one. He deserves the embarrassment he got, and he deserves more consequences than just a letter if he ever tries it again. Not because you're being harsh, but because people like him only respect boundaries when they come with teeth. Your mother is emotionally exhausting in a very specific way. She wants comfort more than truth. She doesn't want to ask, did Kareem do something wrong? She wants to ask, how do we make this stop feeling bad? And her solution is always the same. Make you smaller, quieter, more forgiving, more absorbent. She's not a villain twirling her mustache, but she is absolutely part of the machine that made Kareem. The tears don't cancel the enabling. They just make it harder to challenge. Your father is the peace at any cost guy, which sounds noble until you realize the cost is always paid by the same person. He's been using your resilience as an excuse to neglect you. She'll be fine becomes permission to treat you like an emotional shock absorber. The fact that he finally said he shouldn't have done that is important, but I'm going to be real. That's the bare minimum. Still, it's a crack in the wall, and sometimes cracks are where light gets in if he follows it up with action, not just a tired nod. And Sanaa? She did the hardest thing a family like this forces you to do. She stopped auditioning for basic respect. She handled the sabotage like a CEO, not like a guilty daughter, and that's what saved her business. Also, the line, "Forgiveness isn't the same as access," should be printed on a billboard for every eldest daughter who's been trained to swallow disrespect with a smile. The real win here isn't that the family took notice. The win is that she finally decided notice doesn't equal entitlement. She built something real. They can look at it from the outside. They don't get to climb inside and call it theirs.